almost there. And our next speaker is going to take us to the promised land, which is drinks after this. Folks, is everybody enjoying the conference? Everybody having fun? Everybody filling their brains? Good. Good. I meant what I said last night when we were putting the agenda and program together. I wanted to do a conference that I would want to go to. I've had a few things to deal with today, as you can imagine, but I've made almost every session, most of them, and I've had a lot of fun. So thank you guys for being so great and so supportive. I want to introduce our next speaker for our special tribute tonight to the Right Honourable Brian Mulroney, who we lost not even a month ago. And he is a dear friend of mine, and he is one of the most dedicated Conservatives that I know. And that, my friend, is Mr. Dan Nolan. Dan, absolutely. Dan right now is the Vice Chair of Equity Capital Markets at National Bank. He's had a very successful career in private sector banking. But Dan also has an equally successful career in the public sector serving government. And many of you might know and remember that he served as Chief of Staff to Finance Minister Joe Oliver when Joe balanced the budget just at the end of the Harper years, and Dan was pretty instrumental in getting that done. But one of the other reasons I've asked him to speak tonight is Dan also started out his life as a young staffer during the Mulroney years in the late 80s and early 90s here in Ottawa. So I think there's, and Dan, of course, also was a board member of CSFN in Manning many years ago as well. So I couldn't think of anybody better, particularly also because he is a friend of the Mulroney family, to give tonight's tribute. So he is a proud son of New Brunswick, and I'm happy to welcome to the stage my friend, Mr. Dan Nolan.
Bon après-midi. Merci, je m'appelle Dan Nolan, vous avez entendu. Je voudrais remercier les organisateurs pour m'avoir invité à dire un petit mot sur quelqu'un qui a grandement influencé ma vie. Et je suis sûr qu'il a été très important à plusieurs personnes ici et à travers le pays, le Premier ministre Brian Mulroney. Before I speak, I'd like to share a message that I got from the family, the Mulroney family. While it remains an extremely hard time for the family was honored by their turnout from Canadians from all over, from coast to coast to coast, who took the time to visit with us, to offer their condolences to our father while he was lying in state and in repos. Mrs. Mulroney and her children took solace and pride in hearing every story. And Mrs. Mulroney is a real trooper, by the way. She listened to every single story, and she insisted to stick around to hear everybody. We are grateful to all those who took time to grieve with us throughout the week and at the funeral. The whole country is forever in our hearts, and we cannot thank you enough. My former boss, Joe Oliver, as Adam mentioned, the last finance minister to balance the budget. A few years ago, he went to see Brian Mulroney speak, and he came back, and I'll always remember this, and I said, how was it? And he said, oh, it was great. It was great. He told a lot of the same jokes I've heard before, but you don't listen to Mozart just once. And like Mozart, Mr. Mulroney was a one of one. If you had a chance to watch Mr. Mulroney's funeral, you were probably struck by how only Brian Mulroney could steal the show at his own funeral by singing along with his granddaughter to When Irish Eyes Are Smiling. There was not a dry eye in the place. Since he passed, it's been repeatedly mentioned about the relationship Mr. Mulroney had with his caucus. But having worked as a staffer in Michael Wilson's office at the time, I saw it myself, and it's hard to appreciate how dedicated his caucus was to him and he was to them. Even as our approval rating for the government was in the mid-teens, and it's hard to imagine who those mid-teens were. I don't even know if our own family supported us back then. But on those Wednesday caucus meetings, after those meetings, every single person in that room would have walked through fire for him. And they would have gladly gone into an election for him. So we've heard a lot of praise from Mr. Mulroney over the last few weeks about his collaboration with the Americans to actually fix the acid rain issue, about his advocacy for the end of South African apartheid and the liberation of Nelson Mandela, about his dismantling of the National Energy Program, the creation of the Atlantic Accord, and the territory of Nunavut. But perhaps one area that really hasn't gotten a lot of focus until the next Prime Minister of Canada, Pierre Poilievre, mentioned it this morning, was his how transformative he was to modern conservatism. So the Canada Strong and Free Network has evolved as the place to celebrate the conservative movement in Canada. But before he became leader in 1983, conservative leaders ran on such non-conservative ideas as wage and price controls. They intervened in the economy. They ran against free trade with the United States. And they created crown corporations. Hell, a conservative even created the CBC. Prime Minister Mulroney privatized almost 40% of the crown corporations. He championed deregulation. He went to war with our allies in the Persian Gulf. He walked shoulder to shoulder with Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher during the height of the Cold War. Canada was the first country to recognize Ukraine, defended Israel on the world stage, and won a seat on the Security Council. He championed the most consequential economic policy since Canada's founding, the Free Trade Agreement with the United States, and fought and won a bruising election, a campaign about it. He went from town to town, in every town hall meeting and every public gathering, and was able to take on anybody who wanted to in French or English, which I'm sure terrified his staff, but he had wide-ranging open debates on it, and to his credit, won. But perhaps the most important and necessary and conservative thing he did was, with Michael Wilson and Don Mazankowski in finance, was focus like a laser on Canada's fiscal framework and on the massive out-of-control deficit inherited in 1984. The deficit, believe it or not, was almost $40 billion on an operating budget for the government of just over $80 billion. Imagine that. It seems quaint now, but the government actually focused on spending control, laying off civil servants, freezing salaries of public servants such as the Governor General, Lieutenant Governors, federal judges, senators, cabinet ministers, and even the Prime Minister. They even reduced unemployment benefits, and they reduced overall spending from the government in the 1993 budget by 3%. Prime Minister Mulroney did such a good job of communicating with Canadians that eliminating the deficit was crucial, that the Liberals actually bought in, and they focused on it when they took power. They were, in fact, so disciplined about government spending, the Conservatives, I mean, that the operating budget of the government in 1993 was the equivalent of 30% smaller than it was when Prime Minister Trudeau took over in 2015. J'ai grandi dans un petit village acadien et l'origine de M. Mulroney était une grande inspiration à plusieurs jeunes comme moi à travers le pays. Avoir été élevé par un père qui était électricien à l'usine de papier du village, il est devenu un des grands hommes d'affaires de politique canadienne et du monde entier. I grew up in a small town in New Brunswick, and I'm sure I wasn't alone as a kid in drawing inspiration from Prime Minister Mulroney's origins, growing up in Bécomo, the son of the paper mill's electrician. And if he could become a successful lawyer, businessman, and then the Prime Minister, then maybe getting out of my small town wasn't that far out of reach. The group here has prepared a great video, and I think it'll bring back a lot of memories. So thank you all very much.
Me again. My apologies, folks. There's a technical issue with the video. We're going to see if we can get it worked out. So I'm going to, it is not happening, or it is? You need a little more time. 2 minutes. 2 minutes. Well, I was going to do this after to close out, but maybe I will do it now since we have 2 minutes. And I'm going to speak very slowly for the next 2 minutes. No. So many of you have looked at the program and have seen a strange opening in the calendar tomorrow morning for, I think we're calling it a special keynote. Is that right? Yeah. Do I have the text right? Okay. Our special guest tomorrow, you can appreciate why we've sort of kept it under wraps, is going to be the former Prime Minister of Israel, Naftali Bennett. And as I said in my comments last night, and you heard it from Prime Ministers Abbott and Johnson, it's a very important time to be standing with our friend and ally in Israel. And moral clarity in our foreign affairs is, I think, a very important conservative principle that many of us in this room, probably all of us, can agree on. So I think it's quite fitting, and we're quite fortunate to have him join us tomorrow. And I'm very, very much looking forward to it, and I'm sure all of you are. So thank you. So I hope you guys will all be here. I think it's at 11. Do I have that right? Is that what people say? I see thumbs up. Okay, good. Good. And now I'm going to look at the folks at the back who are doing this, which I think means keep stalling. I'm terrible at this. And for those of you who know me, I hate doing this. I don't like this at all. But I do it because it's about the movement, and it's not about me, and it's not about this job. It's about CSFN. What did people think of Tony Abbott and Boris Johnson last night? Should we have them back? Boris, on our way to a private event in Toronto the other day, typical. So he is, I get to meet a lot of, conservative leaders and former prime ministers and leaders and stuff in this gig, which is very fortunate and exciting for me. But you always worry when you're going to meet somebody like that. You hear all kinds of stories. He's this big, gregarious guy, big personality, kind of nuts, always with the hair and all that nonsense. But he truly is larger than life when you meet him in person. It doesn't disappoint. And I was fortunate to spend some time with him. But at one point we were walking down University Avenue, right close to Wellington, and there are people stopping him, and I'm like, oh my God, this is not going to go well, and his security's starting to freeze up intense. But every single person that came up to him thanked him and wanted to say hello. Not one bad comment or anything like that. But his obsession with trying to sell us British cheese is something that he is relentless with. And at every engagement that he did, both in Toronto and yesterday in Ottawa, I believe he even mentioned getting British Stilton cheese into the Canadian market in his private meeting with Pierre Oliver. I don't think he's a paid cheese lobbyist, but he'd be an excellent one, and I would buy any imported British cheese with his face on it, I'll tell you that. I am now, ladies and gentlemen, getting a thumbs up, so I think I can go. Thank you all very much. I'm not going to speak after this. We're going to listen to the video, and then we'll break. So thank you, everybody.
If Canada, middle power, doesn't stand for human rights, the defense of human rights and individual liberties, what do we stand for? All I'm concerned about is making certain that Canada turns out to have been on the right side of history.
What we need is new leadership and new vision and a new articulation of a sense of purpose. And with that, we can win and win a genuine majority government representing French and English, east and west, and bring this country of ours together as never before.
To the Queen of Canada, to my good friend and good neighbor, Prime Minister Brian Mulroney and Mrs. Mulroney, and to the enduring bond between our two North American peoples.
I've told you and told the Canadian people, Mr. Mulroney, that I had no option.
Well,
Truman, your next question.
You had an option, sir. You could have said, I am not going to do it. This is wrong for Canada, and I am not going to ask Canadians to pay the price. I today, sir, as a Canadian, believe genuinely in what I am doing. I believe it is right for Canada. I believe that in my own modest way, I am nation building because I believe this benefits Canada and I love Canada. Chers amis, dear friends, mes premiers mots seront pour vous remercier, vous concitoyens et concitoyennes de Manicouagan.